I never planned for any of it. Not the shifting, not the silence, not the slow erosion of everything I thought was fixed. I had a life, a structured, neat life, the kind that hums with predictability. Morning coffee at 7:15. Grocery lists pinned to the fridge. Weekend walks with the same podcast in my ear and the same polite greetings to the same dog-walking neighbors. Nothing changed, not really. Not until he came. His name is Alex. Not someone I would have thought twice about once. The son of my husband's longtime friend, 24. Temporarily staying in our guest room while he figured things out after some vague career break. I didn't ask too many questions. I wasn't supposed to. That was his business, not mine. My husband had insisted it was just for a few weeks, maybe a month at most. I said yes, because what else do you say when your husband looks at you like you're being unreasonable for even hesitating? It started like that, ordinary, forgettable. But the house began to sound different with him in it. There was music where there had been silence. Laughter coming from the guest room as he watched things on his laptop. Conversations in the kitchen that stretched longer than they should have. I found myself making extra portions when I cooked, adding small things I hadn't bothered with before, freshly grated lemon, a sprig of mint, a swirl of sauce. I told myself I was just being polite, hospitable, but I was watching him. Not in the way people write about in stories, not with desire, not at first. More like curiosity. There was something in the way he moved through space, unbothered, effortless. He didn't need anyone's permission to laugh out loud, or to put his feet up, or to hum while washing dishes. I had forgotten what that looked like, someone unafraid to take up space. My name is Claire. I'm 38. I live in a house with 2 bathrooms, 3 bedrooms, and a man I used to believe was my home. Marcus, my husband, is kind, responsible, loyal, but with him, the air always felt measured. Even our conversations sounded like well-rehearsed lines. We used to be different, but I couldn't say when it changed. Only that it did. And I kept rearranging furniture, changing recipes, repainting walls, hoping it would fix something that was never about the house. Alex didn't try to fix me. He just saw me. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe I just imagined it because I needed someone to. Still, the way he asked about my day felt different. Not the empty politeness of a spouse asking out of habit. He listened. He laughed at the right parts. He didn't interrupt. One evening, I told him about a book I had read years ago that changed the way I thought about time. I hadn't talked about books in months, maybe longer. He leaned in. Not physically, just with attention. As if nothing else mattered in that moment. I told myself it was innocent. But something in me was waking up. Not lust, not yet. It was slower, deeper, more dangerous. It was memory. Of who I used to be before I became someone's wife. Before I became someone who stopped being asked questions that didn't involve schedules or groceries. It rained one night. A thick, angry rain that shook the windows. Marcus was out of town again, one of his endless conferences. I had finished cleaning the kitchen, lit a candle, curled up with a throw blanket and an old movie. Alex came down the stairs in a hoodie, barefoot, a bowl of cereal in his hand. He didn't say anything at first, just sat on the other end of the couch. The flicker of the screen danced across his face. "I love this scene," he said suddenly. His voice startled me. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath. I smiled, maybe too quickly. "You've seen it. Too many times," he said. "But it always hits." And then we just watched. Not touching, not talking, just being there. The quiet between us felt charged, like static waiting to snap. I felt my body become hyper-aware, the way you do when someone stands just a bit too close behind you, not touching, but present enough to feel it. I went to bed early that night. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about how his eyes looked when he said, "It always hits." I thought about how long it had been since I had felt anything hit. I had become so good at not feeling, I forgot what it was like to notice. And now I couldn't stop noticing. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Thanks for the movie night. Needed it." Hey! It was nothing. A scrap of handwriting. But I read it 3 times and folded it into my planner like it mattered. I started taking longer in the kitchen. Not because I needed to, the recipes were the same, the motions automatic, but because I liked the way the space felt when Alex passed through it. I liked the echoes of his humming, the rhythm of his footsteps, the clink of his spoon in a ceramic bowl. It was like living with a song I hadn't heard in years. Familiar in its feeling, but new in its detail. Marcus came back from his trip that Friday. He kissed my cheek, set his suitcase by the door, and asked if I had remembered to pay the gardener. I said yes. He nodded. That was the whole conversation. I watched him go upstairs without looking back. I wondered if he noticed how quiet I had become. Or maybe I'd always been this quiet. He had just stopped noticing long ago. That night, the 3 of us had dinner together. It should have been awkward, but it wasn't. Not exactly. Alex was good at conversation, casual, effortless. He asked Marcus about his trip, told a few stories about old college friends, made just enough jokes to keep things light. I mostly listened, smiled when appropriate. But every now and then, I caught his eyes on me. Not long enough to be suspicious, just long enough to be felt. Later, Marcus fell asleep early. He always did after travel. I lay beside him in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I could hear the faint sound of Alex's music through the walls, low, ambient, comforting. And somewhere in the middle of the night, I got up and stood by the hallway window, watching the soft glow of streetlights across our neighborhood. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I knew what I wasn't waiting for anymore. Not a rescue, not a thrill, just a moment that belonged to me. The next morning, I found a cup of coffee on the counter, still warm. No note this time, but I knew it was from him. Marcus didn't drink coffee, and I hadn't made it. That unspoken gesture felt louder than anything else that day. Alex and I didn't speak much in front of Marcus, but when he was gone back to work, back to routine, the silences filled again with something else. One afternoon, we sat on the patio, the sky heavy with clouds. I was pruning a few withered leaves off a potted basil plant. Alex sat across from me with a book in his lap, unopened. "I used to think I knew what I wanted," he said suddenly. I looked up. "What changed?" He smiled faintly. "Life. Disappointment. Realizing how little of myself I was actually living with." I didn't say anything at first, because I felt it too. That sensation of existing in a version of yourself that stopped being accurate years ago, like wearing clothes that no longer fit, but still hanging them neatly out of habit. I think I said carefully that sometimes we just stop asking questions. He looked at me then, really looked. "Maybe we need to start." There was no touch, no closeness, just words. But they lingered. A few days later, Marcus had another short trip. I didn't know whether I was relieved or ashamed to feel a strange sense of freedom. I didn't make any big decisions. I just stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't. I wore the perfume I used to wear in my 20s. I lit candles in the living room even when no one was visiting. I played music, not the kind we usually had in the background, but the kind that made me remember myself. That evening, I walked past the guest room and paused. The door was slightly open. Alex was sitting on the floor, back against the bed, sketching. I hadn't known he could draw. His shirt sleeves were rolled up. There was a half-drunk glass of water on the nightstand, condensation running slowly down the side. I didn't step in. I just watched for a moment. Not him. Just the stillness. The scene. It was like watching a memory being made in real time. Then he looked up. Not surprised. Not startled. As if he'd known I was there the whole time. "Want to come in?" he asked. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say no. Not because it was wrong, but because I didn't trust myself to define what wrong even meant anymore. Still, I stepped inside. Sat on the floor opposite him. He turned the sketchbook toward me. It was a window open with fabric blowing slightly in the breeze. "Why that?" I asked. "Because it doesn't know if it's open or closed," he said. "And I like that." I smiled. "That's poetic." He shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe I just like the space between decisions." We talked for an hour. Maybe more. I don't remember what time it was when I stood to leave. But I remember how his voice stopped me at the door. "Claire," he said quietly. I turned. "You're not invisible." It was nothing. And it was everything. Later that night, I lay awake in bed again. The house felt too quiet, too loud, too full of things I couldn't say. I wasn't in love with Alex. But something in me was changing because of him. And that was enough to keep me up long past the hour when the world goes still. The next morning, I woke up before anyone else. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror longer than I should have, touching my own face like it belonged to someone I hadn't properly seen in years. There were lines near my mouth I didn't remember earning. My eyes looked tired, but alert, like they'd been trying to speak for a long time and finally had my attention. I didn't wear anything special that day. Just a loose cardigan, old jeans, no makeup. But I moved through the house like it had changed. Like I had changed. I brewed coffee without rushing. Watered the plants in the hallway that I usually ignored. When I walked into the kitchen, Alex was already there, barefoot, reading something on his phone. He looked up, then did a double take, not in the way a man stares at a woman, but the way someone notices something, unspoken. "You look different," he said. I smiled. "I feel different." He nodded, then poured me a cup of coffee. That was all. But it was enough. That afternoon, it rained again, not loud, but steady. Marcus called from the airport. His flight was delayed. Again. He sounded apologetic but distracted, as usual. I told him not to worry. Told him I'd hold down the fort. Told him everything was fine. And in a way, it was. At least on the surface. Alex and I crossed paths in the hallway just before sunset. We paused. The air between us felt tight. Not romantic, not overt, but still charged. He leaned against the doorframe. I leaned against the wall. "I keep trying to convince myself this is just about attention," I said quietly. "That I'm just lonely. That you're just convenient." Alex didn't answer right away. He looked at me like he could see something unraveling, slowly and silently. Then he said, "Is it working?" "No," I whispered. He stepped back, giving me space. And somehow that made it harder. Because he wasn't trying to win. He wasn't trying to steal or seduce. He was just there. Listening. Present. And I hadn't realized how rare that was. That night, I couldn't sleep. Again. I went downstairs. The storm had passed, but the house still smelled like rain-soaked wood and candle wax. I curled up on the couch with a blanket. I wasn't expecting anything. I just didn't want to be upstairs, lying next to a man who had become a stranger to me, or maybe I had become a stranger to him. Footsteps approached. Slow. Careful. It was Alex. He stood in the doorway, unsure. Couldn't sleep? I shook my head. You. Same. He didn't ask. He just sat down on the other end of the couch. We sat there in silence. It wasn't tense. It wasn't charged. It was still. And then, a conversation. Not about us. Not about the storm inside my chest. Just about small things. Regrets. Childhood. Music. Family. And suddenly, without warning, I cried. Not sobs. Not a meltdown. Just quiet, unstoppable tears. The kind that don't need a reason, only a witness. Alex didn't touch me. He didn't say, "It's okay." He just sat there, still, like a person who knows how to stay. "I don't know who I am anymore," I said. "You do," he replied. "You're just scared she's not who you're supposed to be." Marcus returned the next morning. I heard his car before I saw him, the slow roll of tires up the gravel. I panicked, suddenly overwhelmed by the smell of the blanket still wrapped around me, the memory of last night's honesty. Not guilt, not shame, just fear. That everything fragile inside me would be swallowed again by routine. He hugged me at the door. I stiffened. He didn't notice. He never did. That evening, the house was full again. Not with warmth, with weight. Marcus was cheerful, recapping his trip. I smiled and nodded. I laughed when I needed to. Alex barely spoke. He stayed quiet during dinner, eyes fixed on his plate. The space between us felt different. He was retreating, respecting the boundary I had drawn without speaking. After dinner, I stood at the sink, washing dishes while Marcus watched TV in the next room. Alex came in to put away a glass. Our hands brushed. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "You don't have to be," he replied. "But you should know something." I looked at him. "What?" "You woke something up in me too." And then he walked out. I sat on the patio that night, alone, wrapped in a shawl. The wind was cooler, the stars sharper. I felt like I was hovering between two lives, the one I had built and the one I had never dared imagine. Neither of them perfect, neither of them promised. I didn't want to run away. I didn't want to break anything, but I couldn't pretend to be asleep anymore either. I had seen the shape of myself in someone else's eyes, and I wasn't ready to look away. The morning after that conversation, the house felt hollow in a new way. Not empty, full, if anything, but in a way that pressed in on me, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I moved through the kitchen on instinct, hands going through the motions. Coffee filter, water, switch, steam. But everything felt quieter, even the bubbling of the machine like a whisper I wasn't supposed to hear. I didn't know what to expect from that day. It was a Sunday, which meant the neighborhood would be alive with leaf blowers and dogs and the sound of children on bicycles. But inside our house, time felt suspended, like a clock left unwound. Marcus had already retreated into his office, muttering something about needing to catch up before the new week. I barely acknowledged it. We'd been moving around each other like polite coworkers lately, functional, careful, distant. There was no malice in it, just fatigue, a soft forgetting. And Alex, he was quiet too. I hadn't seen him yet, but I could feel him in the walls. His presence, like the echo of a conversation you don't want to admit you remember. I didn't know if he would say goodbye, or if he would just vanish. And maybe I didn't want to know, because goodbyes require some kind of naming. And we had never named what we were. I spent the morning cleaning, not because anything was particularly dirty, but because the repetition of cleaning, the folding, the wiping, the straightening, gave me something to do with my hands. Something to organize when nothing inside me felt organized at all. It was nearly noon when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I didn't turn. I just kept wiping down the already clean countertop. I heard him hesitate in the doorway. Then he spoke, gently. "I'll be out of your way by this afternoon." I nodded. "Okay." He lingered. I could feel his words trying to form, like smoke circling before taking shape. Then, "I wasn't trying to cause anything, Claire." "I know," I said, my voice so soft I barely recognized it. "And you didn't." "Not really." He stepped into the room, not close, just enough to be visible at the edge of my peripheral vision. "You don't have to pretend with me." "Not now." I turned then. Slowly, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, I looked at him directly. Not as a guest. Not as an interruption. Just as a mirror. What do you think I'm pretending about? I asked. That you're not grieving something, he said, even if it's something you never had. I inhaled sharply, surprised at how quickly the tears stung behind my eyes. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I just nodded. You're right. There was a long pause. Then say goodbye, he said. I don't know how. You don't have to know how. Just mean it. I looked down at the cloth in my hand, still damp, clutched too tightly. I set it down, then finally said the words. Goodbye, Alex. He nodded once, then turned, walked toward the door. I didn't follow. I just listened. To his steps, to the rustle of a bag, to the soft click of the front door opening. And then nothing. Just silence. I didn't move for a long time. Eventually, I sat on the floor of the kitchen, my back against the cabinets, legs stretched out in front of me. The floor was cool. The kind of cool that wakes you up slowly, cell by cell. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I thought about the version of me I had buried quietly over the years. The one that used to laugh without checking the volume. The one that used to write poetry on grocery receipts. The one that once painted her bedroom yellow just because the light looked better that way. That afternoon, Marcus asked if I wanted to join him for a walk. I said yes. Not because I was ready to talk, but because I didn't want to keep disappearing. We walked side by side through the neighborhood, past houses that looked like ours, with hedges trimmed just so and wind chimes on porches. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. His face looked tired, drawn in a way I hadn't noticed before. Maybe we'd both stopped seeing things. Or maybe we'd stopped wanting to. He talked. About work, mostly. I listened. Then I told him I'd started journaling again. He looked surprised. Then he smiled. That's good, he said. That was it. No follow-up. No probing. But it was something. A start. That night, while folding laundry, I found a sketchbook tucked between two stacks of towels. I recognized it immediately. The cover worn at the edges, the elastic band stretched thin. I didn't open it at first. I just stared. Then slowly, I flipped through. Page after page of quiet places, windows, open fields, dim hallways. Then, near the end, a drawing of a woman. Sitting by a window. Her back straight. Her hands folded. Not smiling. But not invisible either. Underneath, written in pencil. Still becoming. I pressed my palm to the page, then closed it. I didn't reach out. Didn't chase the what-ifs. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine. Sat on the porch. Watched the wind move through the trees. For the first time in years, I didn't need to be anything for anyone. I just existed. In the quiet. In the almost. In the not yet. And maybe that was enough. Not because it solved anything. Not because it erased the ache. But because it reminded me gently, fiercely, that I was still here. Still changing. Still mine.